Hello everyone and welcome to part 2 of the European series. If you haven't seen part 1 just yet, go ahead and check it out. A lot of you voted to see more countries featured on the list, so here they are. And it goes without saying that while this video is based on thorough research and cultural observations, talking about culture requires a generalization. What's more, the world is rapidly changing, so what I'm going to talk about in this video may not be as true for the younger generation. Without further ado, let's get to the video. The first country on the list is Italy. I don't typically make a lot of videos about Italy. Why? For one reason, Italy has been glamorized time and time again. There are so many movies about that American girl going abroad. She comes to Rome, meets a beautiful guy named Paolo when she's lost somewhere next to the Spanish Steps. He drives her around on his moped around the somehow tourist-free and incredibly clean city as she tries real pasta for the first time in her life and realizes what it's like to be alive. I would like to see a movie for once when a girl goes to Lisbon, meets a guy named Pedro who takes her out for bacalhau de natas and sagres, and then they have a plate of sardinhas and kiss. The end. Unsurprisingly, Italians are the nation that is typically found the most attractive across Europe. Just watch my European and Brazilian videos to see how many people admitted they wanted to date an Italian. And the statistics confirm those findings. But why? Well, here is my take on it. The Germans are known for their engineering. Think of Germany's biggest export, cars. The Brits for their sense of humor and questionable food. And the Italians for their art of beauty. From the architecture to the designers to the music to the food. Which is why if all an Italian man wants to do is get you into bed, he will do so with beauty in mind. Compared to some other European countries, Sweden, Italian men typically put good effort into the first date. It's common to do aperitivo or restaurant-style dates, and people tend to dress up because, again, presentation is important. There's still a belief that the woman needs to be won over, seduced, more so in the conservative South. And while Italian men are typically encouraged to sleep with women, Italian women are raised to believe that they should hold out on sex until the man is fully committed. Again, much more so in the South. No surprise then that there is such a fame around Italian men seducing foreign women who, for some mysterious reason, hate being catcalled in their country and then shed all inhibitions and clothes at the sound of their name being pronounced in Italian. There's an assumption that Italians cheat a lot, and I couldn't help but look into that. The answers were interesting. According to a 2023 study, 45% of Italians have admitted to cheating on their partner, but ahead of them was actually Denmark, with 46% of people admitting to having an affair. Oh, those frisky Danes. The next on the list is Denmark. It goes without saying that Danes are incredibly similar to the rest of the Scandinavian family. But while Sweden is typically seen as the politically correct Big Brother poster boy, and Norway the I recently got rich Lululemon-clad sister that skis on the weekend, Denmark is more of a rebellious, fun-loving cousin who lives in the basement and chugs beer all day long. Not only is Denmark geographically closer to the Netherlands and Germany, but it is also culturally closer to these two countries. Compared to the more correct Sweden, Danes are direct and love a witty and dry sense of humor akin to the Brits. But dating in Denmark is very similar to the rest of the Nordic family. Number 1, there are no dating rules to speak of. Number 2, dating is casual. The asking for the date and the date activities such as a drink or a walk or just, doing stuff together until you somehow fall into a relationship. Then you can cozy it up and do the whole hygge thing that Denmark became known as a means of getting through the long, dark winter. Number 3, same as in Sweden or Finland, Danish women are considered self-sufficient and independent. So men don't typically open doors, carry heavy bags, or do any big chivalrous type stuff. Number 4, sex is seen as a kind of fun activity, not something to work up to through a series of dates, but more something to get out of the way to test if there's sexual compatibility. Ladies, don't expect Danish men to show much open interest towards you. Danes might not even text you first, expecting you to reach out. There's much less focus on the man taking the role. Both are supposed to contribute equally. Funny fact, the Nordics are renowned for feminism with some of the most equal gender rights. However, when polled, Danish women only labeled themselves as feminists a quarter of the time, compared to 46% of Swedish women. I was so shocked to read that Danish women preferred to be wolf-whistled than called a feminist, saying, I don't mind if it's done in a nice way, or I see it as a compliment actually. Turns out a lot of Danish women would prefer men to be more like Southern Europeans and tell them how nice they look. One more set of interesting facts before we move on to the next country. Did you know that Denmark is the first country to legalize porn, make sex ed mandatory, and recognize registered partnerships for same-sex couples. They are also so comfortable around nudity. An expat I interviewed told me she would often see the couple across from her walk around fully naked in the house. I guess curtains aren't much of a thing in their houses, kind of like the Dutch, except you probably wouldn't see Dutch people walk around naked in their house. Most Danes live by the mantra, if it feels good and is not hurting anyone else, why not do it? Live and let live. Next up on the list is the most neutral country of Europe, and that is Switzerland. If there were two words to describe Swiss people, the first one would be rules. In Switzerland, there are a lot of societal expectations. No noise after certain hours or in most places like public transport. Sorry, Spaniards. People take cleanliness and punctuality seriously, and they are perfectionists in general, which is one of the reasons Switzerland looks the way it does. The second word would be privacy. Swiss highly respect the private sphere. To foreigners, they can come across as reserved and aloof. If you think you can meet someone at a party and in an eagerness to connect, try to get close and personal right off the bat, this might come off intrusive for most Swedes. That kind of rapport takes a long time to build, so it's no surprise that we have people moving to Switzerland and complaining that they cannot make a single friend. Getting into the inner circle is a tough feat for most. What's interesting is that I've connected with quite a few Swiss Germans when I was in Latin America. Quite a lot of men, as I find more Swiss men tend to typically travel out of their country. Interestingly, I found quite a few of them to be passionate and hot-tempered, but it could be due to the fact that they were on the road traveling to these warmer countries and as such didn't really fit into the image that we have of the stiff and the reserved Swiss. This is why I find that meeting people abroad might not be the best or most accurate representation of people from their culture, because it represents a more open-minded and free demographic. And by the way, these Swiss guys also complained to me how hard it was to date women in Switzerland, so it makes sense that they all made their way to Latin America in heaps. The next country on the list is Ukraine. I believe that Ukrainians and other Eastern Europeans are a perfect contrast to the Swiss and the Swedes, and that's because the values couldn't be more different. By the way, if you want to know what culture you're compatible with, stay tuned for my cultural compatibility quiz, where we take a look at the cultures that are most and least compatible with your personality type. And would you want me to make a video on this topic as well? Let me know in the comments below. Ukrainians highly value gender roles. There's this big stereotype of Ukrainian and Eastern European women that are out to use the man to make him pay through the nose. And I can agree, there are quite a lot of women that are guilty of exploiting men in Eastern Europe, but for most women, it's just the way that culture dictates their life. In countries like Ukraine, Russia, or in Belarus, there's a big focus put on status, on the VIP, you know, from the nicest shoes to the nicest bag to the nicest car. I personally believe that it is due to a history of communism where everyone lived a life identical to everyone else. My mom lived through that time, and she says that everyone wore the same coats, the same shoes, and drove the same car. If they had a car, most didn't. And it was nearly impossible to get access to other things. So the feeling of being poor stayed in people's psyche. They were so deprived that a kind of overcompensation came out of that. In Ukraine and Eastern Europe at large, men's status matters more than looks. Women typically expect the men to do well financially and to take care of them in a relationship. I believe it's almost seen as the man's duty, the manly thing to do. Feminism didn't hit the same way in Eastern Europe. So while about 48% of women are in the workforce, it doesn't stop most to still believe that building a family is essential to one's happiness. I recently had a conversation with my Ukrainian hairdresser, and it was the perfect example to illustrate the point. She said, I wake up at 5 in the morning specifically to make breakfast for my husband and to kiss him goodbye. I read somewhere that if I do that, there's less of a chance of heart disease, he's gonna perform better at work, and he's just gonna be a happier person in general. So I do that because I love him and I want him to do better. And that, my viewers, is the best example of the Ukrainian woman's mindset at its best. And of course, she's in her 20s and already married. By the way, I have a video out on the difference between dating in Western and Eastern Europe, so stay tuned for that as I go deeper into the differences. Next up on the list is the beautiful, sunshine-filled Greece. We all know the stereotype that Italian men grow up spoiled by their mamas, and Greek men are right up there with that stereotype. Imagine growing up in a house where your mama does your laundry, changes your bed, makes moussaka for you, and handles decisions for you up until the age of 30 to 35. This is the age when Greek men typically move out of their house and right into their wife's home. I joke. But yes, they move out quite late. For reference, Italians and Portuguese move out at 30, and the Danes at 21. As can be expected from such a start to adulthood, many men are said to expect their girlfriends to take care of the cooking and cleaning. It varies from bigger cities like Athens to smaller cities and villages and islands. But typically, as a girlfriend of a Greek guy, you will have to compete with the mama. Greek men are said to be passionate, outspoken, and not afraid to share their feelings. But egos can be fragile here. Greeks have the reputation of being highly family-oriented, very old-fashioned, and typically marrying earlier. But having looked at statistics, I can say that that's not exactly true. We have Russia come in at 28 for men and 25 years old for women, the lowest in all of Europe. We have Denmark for 35 and 32 respectively, and Greece comes in at 33 for men and 30 years old for women. Guys, can you guess the latest age for people to get married in Europe? Let me know what country you think that might be. And it's probably not the country that you're thinking of. I was really surprised when I found out the country that gets married latest. So I'm gonna tell you at the very end of the video. Next up, we have Hungary. I have to start with the fact that I absolutely love Budapest. It's such a beautiful city. But as for interacting with Hungarians, it gets tough. Not because their language is impossible to learn, which it most definitely is. But I find Hungarians are quite closed off and can appear really unfriendly to foreigners. And customer service in Hungary leaves a lot to be desired. But at least you're not paying 18% for it like you are in Canada. So yes, I feel that Hungarians, at least in the older generation, are quite a pessimistic bunch, which is not surprising due to the dark past of both Hungary and Poland. But with that comes a dark and sarcastic sense of humor, which I personally love. By the way, I didn't come up with this portrayal. I have Hungarian friends that are living in Hungary, and they often complain about the negative, complaining-filled approach that Hungarians have towards life. But for the dating scene, I find Hungarians to be quite old-fashioned and family-oriented. Hungarian men like to do things like open the doors for women and paying on dates. Because of strong gender roles and expectations, Hungarian men typically don't show their emotions openly, so they can be a bit stoic and quite a stubborn bunch. And when it comes to Hungarian women, they are typically quite educated and independent. I would love to include Poland in the mix, but guys, I already did 2 videos featuring Poland and not a lot of you watched it, so I'm gonna include them right here so you can go and check them out right after this video. Next up and final country on the list is the UK. I'm going to talk very briefly about the UK as so much content has already been filmed about this country from all the other sources, and I just did a video comparing Americans to Europeans where I largely talk about the UK. If you're an American or a Canadian, maybe Latin American, your idea of Brits is that of posh, highly intelligent people. Now, if you live in Europe, your impression of the Brits is more of the piss drunk on the street lying type or yelling in an ungodly voice while wearing the tiniest leopard skirt with heels in hand type, especially if you live in Spain or Portugal, which is where most Brits go for vacation.
My name means freedom.
Your name
Means freedom.
Freedom.
Like liberty means freedom.
Yeah, because it was that Statue of Liberty.
Yeah, in New York.
Is that so? That means Statue of Freedom.
I don't think my name means Statue of Freedom, no.
Typically, Brits are known to be reserved and have a fear of sharing emotions openly. I think it's that discomfort with vulnerability that has created the best defense mechanism in the world. The dry, witty, and self-deprecating sense of humor Brits are so well known for. So the best flirting technique is banter. If someone is pulling your hair and calling your names, chances are they really like you. If you're used to the American style of dating, British are a lot less affectionate or open with their feelings in general. Brits are also a lot more cynical, realistic, and ironic compared to the American go-lucky attitude, which I talked about in length in the last video. If you haven't seen it, go and check it out. So guys, that is it. Thank you all for watching until the end of the video, and I'm gonna keep my promise. I'm gonna tell you the country that gets married the latest in all of Europe. In 3, 2, 1, that's 1, 2, 3. No, it's not Scandinavia. It's actually Ireland. I know, I was really surprised. As it turns out, Irish men get married at around 36.8 on average and women at 34.8 on average. Does anyone know why that might be? Let me know in the comments below. And if you watched until the end of this video, laughed a little, and you feel like you got a whole lot of value and you still didn't subscribe, guys, I also have a podcast. If you guys are curious about culture and all things dating and relationship related, go check out my podcast where I interview incredible creators, Seli from Germany, Varpu from her Finland, and I have many, many more lined up. As usual, stay curious and keep breaking down your barriers.